We begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. All praise belongs to Allah who gathered us here, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ask Allah to make this gathering a source of light on our faces and witness for us on the Day of Judgment, and the means for drawing us closer to Him. And with that, let's begin with the permission of Allah. I'd like to just welcome back our dear brother Tariq Murad, and just a quick background and about our brother Tariq Murad. It's the second time joining us here with these Zoom meetings, and he's the founder of Soaring Revenues Incorporated and brings over 40 years of leadership experience in business management, engineering, and strategic consulting. He's not only helped businesses simplify complex challenges and improve their bottom lines, he's also been a mentor, a coach, and transformational speaker for decades. Beyond his business expertise, our brother Tariq has a deep commitment to community development and outreach, especially around topics of personal growth and understanding Islam. We're honored to have him back with us today. Brother Tariq, welcome again, and we're looking forward to another great session with you.
Very, very happy to be back and happy to meet you. I didn't meet you last time.
No, I've been helping with Brother Mehdi, and he's given me the honor of hosting with you today. So, I'm a little nervous, but Bismillah, we'll make this successful. But we're going to continue where we left off continue on to the next section, the Abrahamic prophetic legacy. And the first question I have for you is, how did the Prophet Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wasalam, establish the foundation for monotheism in his time?
So Prophet Ibrahim, subhanallah, Allah created him and made him very, very, very cerebral and very powerful in the way he would argue things, and he would show this the issue of the monotheism very clearly. And we see that in his very early years as a child, or as watching his father build the idols, and he would ask his father, Father, how can you worship something like that? You're building it yourself. How can you worship it? And trying to get him to use his mind and his brain in this. And his father would say, this is the tradition we have. We have to do this. We have to do this, right? And so on. And what we see immediately after that is that he wanted to make sure that people are thinking a little bit bigger than what they create in front of them. So the Quran narrates a beautiful story for us with him, in which he would say, well, I don't worship what you worship, I worship the star. And just getting them to think much bigger instead of thinking very, very minutely in front of them right there, and for them to look at what Allah's creation looks like and look at the stars. And then, of course, we know the story. The next night, he says, the star has set. It has to be different. It's bigger. It must be the moon. And the moon shines brightly. He says, it must be the moon. Look how beautiful that is, and so on. And of course, when the moon sets, he says, it's not the moon. It must be the sun. And all of this, he's showing people, he's trying to get people to think bigger and elevate their thinking a little bit. A lot, actually. And then finally, he tells them, look at the sun. The sun has set. I don't worship any of these, but I worship the one that created all of them. And, just that rhetoric, just that way of presenting the story, you get this gradual way of thinking, or trying to bring to clear people's head from what they're doing in front of them into something much bigger. And we see this in our lives today, is when we behave with the moment in front of us, we tend to forget about al-akhirah. And when we get into prayer, subhanallah, then we just settle down and say, subhanallah, I need to be more careful what I do, and so on. But that wasn't the only thing that Sayyidina Ibrahim did for his same people. What he wanted, so they didn't respond to this rhetoric. So when they went out for their festival outside of the town, he comes back into town, as we see, and he takes an axe and breaks down every single idol except the biggest one, and he puts the axe with the biggest one, right? And then they come back and say, who did this? What happened, right? And they tell Ibrahim, did you do this? He says, why are you asking me? Look, the big one has the axe. He's the one who did this. Ask him. So they immediately turn to him and say, Ibrahim, what are you talking about? You know they don't talk. He said, well, how do you worship them? What kind of thinking is this for you to worship them? And so they said, the Quran also tells us about this, the fitrah in the Bani Adam, right? So they go back to themselves and say, he's right. How can we worship them? They don't talk. And then they immediately get their arrogance back and say, this is the tradition we have. We have to protect the tradition, right? And so they, we know the rest of the story. They build a big fire for him and they put him in the fire. And of course, Allah rescues him from the fire. But this kind of rhetoric, the way he frames the argument to get them to think a lot bigger, is Sayyidina Ibrahim's beautiful way of presenting this monotheistic religion and Islam as a whole. And this is not the only story, of course. There's another story with Namrud, where he does the same thing. He tells him, who is Allah? And Sayyidina Ibrahim says, Allah is the one who brings life and brings death. And so Namrud says, of course I can do that. The arrogance of a powerful person. Of course I can do that. He takes a free man on the street and he kills him. And then a person was supposed to be executed. He sets him free. So immediately Sayyidina Ibrahim jumps the rhetoric to a much higher level. And he said, Allah brings the sun from the east, bring it from the west. Right? So Sayyidina Ibrahim forces the humanity around him to think outside of their little bubble and to think in a much bigger way. And this is the power of his rhetoric and his ability to frame the argument in a way that would make sense for people and make them really get attracted to it and work through it. And of course, with his wording after this, of course, all his lineage, is using the same kind of arguments and power of those arguments later on.
That's a beautiful response. And next question is what is the significance of the covenant between Allah and Prophet Ibrahim in shaping future prophethood?
So what we see with Sayyidina Ibrahim is that his desire to bring Allah's word to the people was very, 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 very powerful. And so he traveled across what we know today as, what the West terms today as the Middle East, I should say, right? Which is really the holy lands of all the monotheistic faith, right? The whole area there. He's known to have been in Egypt. He's known to have been around the area of Jerusalem and the area of the Levant as a whole, and of course into the area where Mecca is, and and during that time, during his desire to bring this belief to everybody, he was asking Allah to provide him with somebody, with a child, to actually bring forward and continue this legacy. And of course, Allah, because of his intense desire, Allah granted him the Ismail and Sayyidina Ishaq very late in his life. In some stories, it says he was around 80 when he first had Ismail, and others say a little bit earlier than that, but still, it was very late for him. He lived a very large portion of his life doing this on his own with his wives and trying to get people to believe. And Allah gave him Ismail at a very young age, at a very old age, and then later Sayyidina Ishaq after that. And from those, this agreement that he had with Allah, that he wants to bring this belief to everybody, Allah blessed him with a lineage of prophets, not just the two, but of course we know the lineage from Sayyidina Ishaq's side, and we know the lineage from Sayyidina Ismail's side, and how they affected humanity after that. And I think part of that beautiful part of that story is Allah, even though Sayyidina Ibrahim was clearly doing that work all the way through his life into his old age, Allah tested him with, do you really want the son, and do you really love the son more, or the work that you're doing for Allah? And of course, we know the story in which Allah asked him to sacrifice his son Ismail, and his willingness to do this. Not only his willingness to do this, and look at the beauty of his son Ismail. His son Ismail says, "Ya abati, if'al ma tu'mar." And not only my father, in a very endearing phrase, "Ya abati." Which is a very, very endearing phrase for the father. Do what Allah asked you. You'll find me patient with this. And so Allah blessed him with these two sons that are so dedicated to this belief that they really made a difference because of the power of that family. It made a big difference. There's a little hint also in the Quran that Sayyidina Ibrahim may have had more than just two sons. But it's not. It's because of the. I think it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, if I'm not mistaken. It's the referral to his sons is in the plural, not in the dual, right? In the plural, and of course, in Arabic, when we have the dual, the singular, the dual, and the plural, and the reference to them is in the plural, not in the dual. So there's a hint that he may have had other children. But these are the two sons that actually made a difference in the history through their lineage, as we see. His strong stance affected their strong stance, and they're going forward with this. And of course, this became the lineage of the prophets, as we see.
That's a beautiful segue to our next question. How did the lineage of Prophet Ibrahim influence the mission of later prophets, including Musa, Jesus, and our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
So the one of the most important things is that when Sayyidina Ibrahim established the area around Mecca with his son Ismail and built the Kaaba, he asked Allah to provide humanity with somebody. First of all, he asked Allah to bring people to that area, and he asked Allah to provide humanity with somebody who would guide them in that area. So that was the first dua that Sayyidina Ibrahim did, that affected later prophets in terms of the dua, that he knew Allah gave him a wahi that there's somebody else that he's going to provide later. And it's through that we see that when we look at the rest of the prophets coming from Sayyidina Ishaq's side, we see that they are in the Torah with Sayyidina Musa and with the Injil with Sayyidina Isa, is that they both mention a prophet coming at the end of time. And it is the advent of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked by Allah by Sayyidina Ibrahim, and was in the revelations documented in the Quran from Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Isa. It's both there, and it's there because of that understanding. Obviously, if it's in the Torah, then the lineage of the prophets after Musa, all the way to Sayyidina Isa, of course, would know this and would be telling about this prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And very interestingly, because of this, of course, when we come to the story of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that we know that in Arabia there were both the Jewish scholars and the Christian scholars who were waiting for him, and they had his description, and they were waiting for him until he appeared, and we know the stories with them. Some of them working with him, some of them not working with him. But it's the dua of Sayyidina Ibrahim that's fulfilled in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in the Torah and the Injil. It comes down to us through that, and then we get to know that through that process.
And for the sake of time, this is a good chance to cut it in to kind of cut this first section off, and we're going to pause the session and restart in about maybe 30 seconds.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel and hit the like video and share it with friends and family. Thank you.